All right, let's talk about something I think we've all felt. You're trying to learn something new, maybe study for a test or pick up a new skill, but you're anxious and your brain just feels like it's hit a brick wall. Today, we're going to get into the science of exactly what's going on in there. It's such a common experience, right? Your heart's pounding, your mind is just racing with a million thoughts, and any new information you try to take in feels like it's just slipping away. What is actually happening in your brain that makes it so impossible to learn? And here's the crazy part. You'd think scientists would have this all figured out by now, but for a long, long time, the answer has been a total mess. Study after study came back with conflicting, confusing results. It's been a genuine scientific puzzle. So to start cracking this puzzle, we have to look at the main suspects. Because it turns out anxiety isn't just one thing, and that's been a huge part of the problem. The researchers behind this new breakthrough decided to look at two very different types of anxiety. First, you've got physiological anxiety. That's the physical stuff, right? The racing heart, the sweaty palms, that jittery feeling in your stomach. And then you have cognitive anxiety. That's all in your head. The worry, the endless loop of anxious thoughts. The big question is, which one is the real learning killer? Okay, so to figure out how anxiety might be getting in the way, we first need to understand the two main ways our brain actually learns things. And they're very, very different. So on one side, you have your working memory. It's super fast, it's flexible, but it's also kind of fragile. And then you have reinforcement learning, which is the slow and steady workhorse. It learns by trying things, failing, and trying again. A great way to think about working memory is like a little sticky note in your brain. It's perfect for holding on to a phone number just long enough to type it into your phone. But you know how it is. The second someone asks you a question, poof, the number is gone. It's that temporary. Reinforcement learning, on the other hand, that's more like getting good at a video game. At first, you have no idea what you're doing. You're just mashing buttons. But over time, through trial and error and getting those little rewards, your brain starts to build these really solid, almost automatic connections. It's a much deeper kind of learning. So the challenge for the researchers was, how do you design an experiment that can actually pull these two systems apart and see what anxiety is really up to? Well, they came up with a really clever little game to do just that. So here's how it worked. People had to learn to press the right key for a specific image. Simple enough, but here's the trick. Sometimes they only had to remember a couple of images at a time, which really pushes that quick, flexible, sticky note memory. Other times they had to learn a whole bunch of them, which forces the brain to switch over to that slower trial and error system. And then bam, a surprise test to see what really stuck. And this is where the big reveal comes. When they crunched all the numbers, the result wasn't subtle at all. In fact, it was incredibly clear, and it pointed the finger at one specific culprit. The data was just undeniable. The more physical symptoms of anxiety people felt, that racing heart, those jitters, the worse they did on the learning task. It was a straight line. More physical anxiety, worse performance, period. But here's the kicker. The other kind of anxiety, the mental worry, the anxious thoughts, it had almost no real effect on how well people learned. It wasn't the worrying that was gumming up the works. It was the physical feeling of being anxious. And it got even more specific. That physical anxiety was delivering a devastating 1-2 punch. First, it slammed the brakes on that slow trial and error learning system, making it way less efficient. And at the same time, it was making the brain's sticky note memory basically fall apart, causing people to forget things much, much faster. It hit both systems. So, okay, why is this such a big deal? I mean, it's interesting for sure, but the reason it matters so much is that it finally solves that long-standing mystery in neuroscience we talked about. Remember all those confusing, mixed results from older studies? Well, this new finding explains everything. Past research just lumped all anxiety together, and they weren't looking at these two learning systems separately. They were missing the real story. Before this, when scientists saw anxious people struggling, they basically just threw up their hands and blamed it on something they called stochastic decision noise. Now, that sounds super complicated, right? But stochastic decision noise is really just a fancy scientific way of saying random mistakes. The old assumption was just that an anxious brain is a noisy brain, and that people were just guessing more or making more random errors. But what this research shows so powerfully is that it's not just random noise. It's not static. It's a targeted strike. The physical experience of anxiety specifically impairs two different, crucial learning systems in our brain. It's a precise attack.
And that leads us to the most important question of all. If we now know that it's the physical sensation of anxiety that's the real problem for learning, what can we do with that information? Does this open up brand new ways to help people? Think about it. If you can find a way to calm your body, can you free up your mind to learn? That changes everything.